What would you do if the man who once promised to protect you tried to destroy you in front of the whole world just to hide his own shame? Ava Bennett stood outside the grand white church holding her swollen belly, gently trying to calm the baby kicking inside her, as the cold wind brushed against her dark brown skin, while whispers from wedding guests sliced through the air like cruel knives, calling her names and mocking her for arriving looking like a poor black woman desperate for attention, even though she had been invited by the groom himself, Daniel Carter, the man who once loved her, the man who left her the moment she became pregnant. Accusing her of trapping him even though she had never asked him for one penny, and now he was marrying a wealthy white socialite, Emily Hart, whose family had always looked down on Ava because of her skin, her background, and her strength, which they mistook for arrogance. And as Ava walked slowly toward the entrance holding the simple cream dress, she managed to buy the stares grew sharper, the racist comments louder, some guests whispering that she should not be here, that she should know her place, that Daniel deserved better than someone like her. But Ava kept walking, her heart breaking but her spirit refusing to bend, because she had come for one reason: to give Daniel a final chance to acknowledge their unborn daughter, Lily Bennett, a chance he had cowardly refused. And as she stepped into the decorated hall filled with white roses and golden lights, Daniel saw her, his face tightening with anger and embarrassment, as if her very presence threatened his perfect life. And instead of guilt or responsibility, he felt fury that Ava dared to show up, daring to stand in the truth he tried to bury. And as she approached him quietly, asking only for a private conversation, he grabbed her arm, pulling her closer, his voice sharp and filled with venom, telling her she was nothing, telling her she was ruining everything. And before Ava could step back, his rage exploded into humiliation as he reached for the back of her dress, ripping it open with a violent jerk, exposing her torn fabric and bare skin in front of the entire wedding crowd. Gasps filling the room, cameras rising, laughter exploding from cruel guests who enjoyed seeing a black pregnant woman degraded for sport. And Ava froze, her eyes stinging with tears, as Daniel shouted that she had come to beg for money, that she wanted to destroy his future, that she was pathetic and unwanted. And for a moment the world spun around her, her shame heavy, her heart cracked. But then something sparked inside her, something fierce, unbreakable, ancient, a fire that refused to die. And Ava lifted her head, meeting Daniel's cold eyes with a strength he had never been able to crush, realizing in that moment that he had not ruined her. Instead, he had revealed himself to everyone. And as the room buzzed with whispers and judgment, Ava placed her hand over her belly, whispering softly to Lily that she would protect her always, no matter who turned against them. And with a steady voice, Ava told Daniel that he would regret the day he tried to disgrace the mother of his own child. Then she walked out of the church, shoulders straight, tears falling, but dignity rising, knowing that this was not an ending, but the beginning of a battle she would win. So, if you want to follow Ava's fight for justice, strength, and truth, make sure you subscribe and comment. Stand strong to support her courage. Ava Bennett walked down the church steps with trembling hands, holding the sides of her ripped dress as cold wind brushed against her skin. But she kept her head high, even though inside she felt as if her world had shattered, because Daniel Carter had humiliated her in the cruelest way in front of hundreds of people. And now whispers echoed behind her like poison, with guests calling her a liar, a gold digger, a poor black girl who should never have stepped inside a place built for people above her. But Ava kept moving because she had no choice for her unborn daughter, Lily Bennett, who kicked gently as if reminding her that she was not alone. And as Ava reached the parking lot, she heard heavy footsteps and turned to see Emily Hart running toward her, her expensive white gown shining under the sunlight, her face twisted with anger, not sympathy, calling Ava disgusting, telling her she had ruined the happiest day of her life, and that Ava should be ashamed for coming into a space where she did not belong. Using words sharp with racism, words Ava had heard her whole life, but now they cut deeper because they were spoken in defense of the man who had hurt her the most. And before Ava could respond, Emily's mother, Victoria Hart, joined them, her voice cold and sharp, as she demanded Ava leave immediately, saying the police would be called if she did not remove her kind from the property. And Ava felt her stomach twist with pain, but she refused to bow her head because she knew she had done nothing wrong. And when she turned to walk away, Daniel Carter himself stormed out of the church, still furious, his face red, as he shouted that Ava would never see him again, and that their baby Lily meant nothing to him, that he would never accept a child who did not fit his future, words dripping with cruelty and disgrace. And the crowd behind him clapped and laughed, and Ava felt her heart break again. But she did not cry. Instead, she whispered to Lily that she would build a life without him, that she would rise stronger than every insult thrown at her. and just as she reached the street, a gentle voice called her name, and she turned to see Pastor James, a kind, elderly black man who had witnessed everything, and he approached her with compassion, placing his coat around her shoulders, telling her that her dignity was still intact, even if Daniel tried to rip it away. But before Ava could thank him, two police officers arrived, their eyes landing on Ava with immediate suspicion, while completely ignoring Daniel and Emily. As they asked Ava for ID, speaking to her like a criminal and treating her pain like an inconvenience, and Ava realized this humiliation was far from over, but she straightened her back, answering calmly, refusing to let the system break her because she knew truth was on her side. And as she looked at the bruises on her arm where Daniel had grabbed her, she promised herself she would fight back, not just for justice, but for her daughter's future. And if you want to follow Ava's journey for truth, power and justice, make sure you subscribe and comment courage to stand with her. Ava Bennett stood frozen as the two officers stepped closer, their hands already hovering near their belts, as if she was a threat, even though she was the only one bleeding and shaking, and ripped open in the cold parking lot. And Pastor James tried to speak for her, but the officers ignored him and demanded again that Ava show ID, speaking slow and loud, as if she could not understand English, and one officer looked at her stomach with judgment, not concern, asking if the baby even had a father, and the cruel tone made Ava's throat tighten, but she refused to break, and she handed them her ID with steady hands, even though her body trembled from humiliation. And Daniel Carter stood a few steps behind the officers, smirking with satisfaction, enjoying the scene as if it was entertainment for his new wedding crowd. And Emily Hart whispered something to Victoria Hart, and they both laughed, not even trying to hide it. And Ava felt heat rise in her chest, because they wanted her to fall, they wanted her to collapse and beg and cry, but she would not give them that satisfaction. And the officers questioned her like she was a criminal, asking what she was doing in the church, why she came uninvited, why she caused drama, and Ava kept repeating calmly that Daniel had invited her weeks ago, that she had come only to speak for 5 minutes, that she had not wanted a scene, and Pastor James supported every word. But the officers still looked at Ava like she was lying, and then one officer asked if she had job or if she was one of those women who lived off trouble, and Ava felt Lily kick again, as if reminding her to stay strong, and she lifted her chin and answered every question with dignity, slowly forcing the officers to realize she was not what they assumed. But Daniel stepped forward, trying to twist everything again, saying Ava came with intention to destroy his life, and that she was unstable and dangerous, and Ava felt her heart burn, because he had already humiliated her, and now he wanted to take her dignity too. But before the officers could speak, a car suddenly pulled up, and out stepped Grace Bennett, Ava's older sister, dressed in hospital scrubs, her eyes fierce and full of fire, because Pastor James had secretly called her. And Grace pushed through everyone, demanding the officers back away from her pregnant sister, reminding them that Ava was the victim, not the attacker, and her voice shook the whole parking lot, causing even Daniel to step back. And Grace told the officers about the bruises Ava's arms, the ripped dress, the public assault. And for the first time, the officers shifted uncomfortably, realizing they might be on the wrong side. And Daniel tried to speak again, but Grace silenced him with one look, telling him he would not get away with hurting Ava or Lily. And Ava felt tears rise, not from weakness, but from relief, because someone finally stood for her. And holding her sister's hand, she whispered to Lily that light always appears in darkness. And if you want to continue walking with Ava Bennett toward justice, redemption, and revenge, make sure you subscribe and comment courage to show your support. Ava Bennett stood between her sister Grace and Pastor James, as the cold wind carried the stunned silence left behind by Grace's powerful words. And for the first time that day, the officers looked uncertain, their hands dropping away from their belts as they stepped back, and one of them cleared his throat, apologizing weakly. But Ava did not answer, because she had spent her whole life apologizing for things she never did. And today she had no more apologies left inside her. And Daniel Carter finally realized tide was turning, and he tried to grab control again, shouting that Ava was dramatic, that she was trying to ruin his future, that she was only here for money. But Grace moved in front of Ava like a shield, telling Daniel that a man who tears a pregnant woman's dress in front of a crowd has no right to talk about dignity. And Pastor James added that God witnessed everything in that church and truth would never stay buried. And the guests who had laughed earlier now shifted, nervously whispering themselves, because Daniel's cruelty was no longer hidden in the comfort of a celebration. It was exposed under the bright light of truth. And Emily Hart tried to defend him, but Victoria Hart pulled her back, because even she knew the scene had turned, and their family name could not survive the scandal. And as the officers began writing an incident report, Grace demanded they include every detail, every bruise, every humiliation, every racist insult, and Daniel's face twisted in fear because he never expected Ava to fight back, and Ava felt Lily move again like a small spark of hope rising inside her, and she touched her stomach, whispering that everything was finally changing. And when Grace told Ava they were leaving, Ava looked one last time at Daniel, not with pain, but with clarity, telling him he had ripped her dress, but not her dignity, and that one day their daughter, Lily, would know the truth, not his lies. And Daniel stepped back, almost startled, because Ava's strength no longer came from him or anyone else. It came from the fire she had found inside her heart. And as Ava walked away, wrapped in Pastor James's coat, the crowd parted like a path being cleared for a queen, and people who had laughed earlier now looked down in shame, while Grace held Ava's arm with pride. And when they reached Grace's car, Ava took a deep breath, letting the heavy air escape her chest, as if releasing every chain Daniel had ever placed on her spirit. And Grace told her they would file charges, they would speak to lawyers, they would not let this injustice pass unnoticed. And Ava nodded, because she was ready to fight, not out of anger, but for Lily, who deserved a life built on truth, not fear. And when the car pulled out of the parking lot, Ava looked at the church through the window, not with sorrow, but with strength, because she knew this moment was not her ending, it was her beginning. And she whispered to Lily that no matter how harsh the world became, they would rise above every insult, every cruelty, every lie, and for anyone listening to Ava's journey, the lesson is simple: dignity cannot be taken by force, truth cannot be silenced, and strength often grows in the moments when everything tries to break you. So stand with Ava Bennett by subscribing and commenting courage, because her fight for justice has only just begun.